We have to talk about something really important today. And the reason that this is so important is that we can't solve problems unless we understand them. And over the last few days, as different folks have weighed in on the violent Trumpist insurrection that took place last week, I've seen more and more commentaries that are missing the boat when it comes to the immediate and proximate causes of the insurrection and of the coup attempt. And specifically, I'm talking about claims that ultimately what happened last week comes down to merely economic unfairness and inequality and anger by the so-called working class. And even lots of people that I greatly respect have weighed in on this issue, and I believe they are wrong. I'll give you an example. With total peace and love, my former economics professor from the University of Massachusetts, economist Richard Wolff, tweeted, quote, "What was seen in the Capitol building of Washington on January 6th was another manifestation of angry working class people. This will only continue unless basic changes happen in this country. We need to do something about the inequality of this society." I love Richard Wolff. He's been a guest on this show a dozen times. I was recently on his show. This is the worst take I've ever seen from Richard Wolff, who typically has really great takes. To some degree, this idea is a version of class reductionism. Class reductionism is the idea that in the end, all oppression, strife, violence, unrest, it all comes down merely to class struggle. And racial struggle is really class struggle. And nationalistic struggle is really class struggle, et cetera. It's a gender struggle is really class struggle. And that if we reduce inequality, it's going to solve all of these different problems. And I think we have to be very careful because nobody's claiming that economics and class struggle are not important in just about everything that we see in our political system. And even those claiming that it played a role last week are right. But in this particular case, the class struggle aspect of this, absent a more detailed and comprehensive analysis, falls woefully short in explaining what happened last week. Remember, shortly after Donald Trump was elected, there was a whole bunch of talk about this was about economic anxiety. Economic anxiety motivated people to give Donald Trump a shot because he spoke to those economic anxieties. And to some degree, it's true in that Donald Trump, as a faux populist, right-wing populist, that rhetoric certainly appeals to economic anxiety in many people. But then, as we had more information about the motivations of Trump voters, we came to learn that while there was economic anxiety on both the left and the right, that the right was motivated to vote for Donald Trump by many other things, including the resonance of Donald Trump's xenophobia, fear of losing perceived or actual status to immigrants coming in and taking jobs, to brown people, S-hole countries, that entire narrative. And case in point, there are so many counterpoints to the class reductionist argument or explanation about last week's riots that the explanation of this is merely class struggle would be dangerous to accept as a full explanation for what we saw, including, by the way, that many of the people that participated in the insurrection, they had the money to not only travel to Washington, D.C., but to stay in hotels that aren't cheap. Now, I know that there were groups funding the travel, but for many people, that wasn't the case. These people were able to afford going to D.C., taking time off from work if they have a job, if they need to work, and staying in expensive hotels. And so there are, so that's one aspect. The other aspect is there are tons of people on the left and right that economically are way worse off than the protesters, rioters last week, but they were not there. And there are even examples of wealthy people going to D.C. on private jets to participate in the riot, although that's anecdotal. Obviously, most of these rioters did not fly in on private jets. But the point here is that there is something unique to those who, yes, mostly are not particularly privileged economically, but there is a significant xenophobic component. There is a significant ignorance to reality component. People who fall for, listen, if this was just economic anxiety, you wouldn't see that the people at the riot are the people who fell for the obvious lies from Trump about a stolen election. What was really the most common factor among the rioters was that they fell for and they believed that the election was stolen from Donald Trump, which is demonstrably untrue. There were rich and poor people who fell for that. There were elites and non-elites who fell for that. And importantly, poor people who didn't fall for it weren't there rioting. People who were significantly more economically disadvantaged or oppressed by the economic system weren't there rioting because they didn't believe this stupid narrative that the election was stolen. And so I very much appreciate the class aspect that at a general level has generated anxiety and a desire for change. The people that participated in this riot exposed the Trump movement for what it really is. And it's not merely an economic anxiety movement. It's a particularly extreme, radical, conspiratorial worldview informed by being uninformed that, sure, to some degree overlaps with aspects of economic anxiety. But the truth is that at this point, economic anxiety is a reality for a huge portion of this country. I agree with Richard Wolff and others. When half the country can't meet an unexpected $400 expense without going into debt, just about any group, unless you're saying we're only serving private jet owners, just about any group, healthcare workers, factory workers, educational workers, whoever, all of these groups will include a lot of economic anxiety. But that doesn't mean that that's the cause of violent, radical, insurrectionist violence. And let's not miss the forest for the trees and pretend that it goes away simply by solving economic inequality. You'll solve economic inequality. And a lot of these people will be furious that now they are on the same level as a lot of people that they don't believe to be economically stable. And that gets us back to the xenophobia and the rest of it. So I think that these analyses miss the mark. I've seen a bunch of them, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. You can find me on Twitter at @dpakman. I want to take a second to tell you about one of our sponsors, S&H Masks. S&H Masks has everything you need when it comes to face masks and other protective gear for COVID-19, and they're giving my audience 20% off. S&H Masks is the company that I've personally been going to for face masks. I love and trust the products they sell, and that's actually why I reached out to them about being a sponsor. I've tried tons of different face masks this year, like many of you, and I still have not found a mask that is more comfortable or easier to breathe in than the washable cotton masks that they sell. It's made of a silky, lightweight cloth that feels great on the skin, has a convenient adjustable strap. They also have disposable cloth masks, which are really comfortable, as well as all of the other gear like face shields, alcohol wipes, no-touch infrared thermometers. And all of their prices are very reasonable. I also love S&H Masks because they've donated over 60,000 masks to healthcare institutions. They're an excellent company. Shipping is just $5 and shipping is free on orders over $150. You can get there by going to davidpakman.com/mask. The link is under this video, and you can save 20% on everything in their store when you use the coupon code DAVID.